came to visit my daughter, but her stepfather blocked the doorway, he said. She went traveling with friends, her mother forced a smile and said she was happy and told me to stop worrying. Then I heard a faint cry from the old warehouse behind the house. Inside I found my daughter bruised and trembling on the floor. I turned toward them, locked the door, and whispered, "Now let's see how happy you are when my people arrive." The first lie was delivered with a smile, and the second while my daughter's blood was still drying behind the house. By the time Victor Hale told me to leave, I already knew someone inside that property was terrified. I had driven 6 hours to surprise my 24-year-old daughter, Emily, after she stopped answering my calls. Her last message had been strange. "Dad, I'm taking a break, don't come." She never called me Dad. In text, she always called me Pop. Victor filled the doorway in a pressed blue shirt, with his broad shoulders blocking my view. He said, "Emily went traveling with friends. You should learn to respect her space." Behind him, my ex-wife Laura twisted her wedding ring. She said Emily was happy and told me to stop worrying. I looked past them. Emily's car sat beside the garage with dried mud around the tires. Her passport was visible through the open study window lying on Victor's desk. I asked where she went. Laura quickly answered, "Europe." I asked which country. Victor's smile faded. He said this interrogation was exactly why she avoided me. For years they had treated me like the failed former husband who repaired alarm systems for a living. Victor called me the handyman, and Laura let him. Neither of them knew I had sold my security company for $42 million, kept control of its forensic division, and spent the last decade helping prosecutors uncover kidnapping, extortion, and financial fraud. I stepped backward as if embarrassed. Victor chuckled. He told me to go home. Then the wind shifted. From the old warehouse behind the house came a weak metallic clang, followed by a muffled cry. It was my daughter's cry. I ran before Victor could grab me. Gravel snapped beneath my boots. Laura screamed my name. The warehouse door was chained, but the lock was cheap. One strike from the emergency breaker in my truck broke it open. Inside, the air smelled of rust, oil, and something sickeningly human. Nearby, Emily sat on the concrete floor with her wrists tied to a chair. Her cheek was swollen, her lip was split, and bruises covered both arms. Papers lay scattered around her, including trust documents, transfer forms, and a power of attorney naming Victor. She looked at me and whispered, "Pop, don't let them make me sign." Something inside me broke, but my hands remained steady. Victor was led out of the warehouse in handcuffs, but his expression never changed. He looked at me and smiled. "You think this ends with me?" Those words stayed in my mind. As paramedics treated Emily's injuries, one of my forensic investigators handed me a sealed envelope found inside Victor's desk. "You should see this before the police do," he said. Inside were copies of bank records, fake insurance claims, and photographs of 3 young women I had never seen before. Each photo had one word written across the back: "Missing." A chill ran through me. Emily noticed the pictures. "I have seen them," she whispered. My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath. "Victor brought them here, not all at the same time. They stayed in the warehouse for a few days and then they disappeared. He told Mom they had accepted his offer and left." Laura burst into tears. "I swear I thought he was helping them find work," she cried. Emily looked at her with disbelief. "You heard them screaming." The detectives immediately secured every room on the property. Hours later, they uncovered hidden cameras, fake passport stacks of forged documents, and a locked underground storage room beneath the warehouse. One detective walked toward me with a grim expression. "Daniel, this case just became much bigger." He opened a dusty metal box. Inside were dozens of identification cards, passports, and cell phones belonging to different women. Victor had not been stealing one person's future. He had been destroying many. As officers loaded the evidence into police vehicles, Victor turned back toward me one last time. "You still do not know who is really behind this." Before anyone could question him further, a black SUV sped past the police barricade and disappeared down the highway. The detective watched it vanish. That was not an accident. Someone just realized Victor had been caught. Victor and Laura rushed in behind me. Victor carried a crowbar. He said you shouldn't have opened that door. I untied Emily, moved her behind me, then slid the steel bolt across the warehouse entrance, locking all four of us inside. Victor laughed and said you trapped yourself. I took out my phone and pressed one button. I looked at him and quietly said, "No, I trapped you. Now let's see how happy you are when my people arrive." Victor's smile disappeared the moment he heard the sound of approaching sirens. "You made a mistake, Daniel," he growled while gripping the crowbar tighter. "No one is coming to save you." I looked him straight in the eyes. "They are not coming to save me, they are coming for you." Emily stood behind me, shaking so badly she could barely stay on her feet. "Pop, they took my phone, they forced me to sign everything," she whispered. I gently squeezed her hand. "You do not have to be afraid anymore." Victor suddenly charged toward me with the crowbar. Before he could swing it, the warehouse door burst open. 4 members of my private security team rushed inside, followed by 2 detectives from the county sheriff's office. One detective shouted, "Drop the weapon." Victor froze. Laura collapsed onto the floor crying. "It was not my idea. Victor made me do it," she screamed. Emily looked at her mother with tears in her eyes. "You watched him hurt me. You never tried to stop him." Laura lowered her head, unable to answer. One of my investigators carefully picked up the scattered documents from the floor. "Daniel, these papers transfer Emily's trust fund, her house, and every investment into Victor Hale's name. Most of the signatures are forged." The detective looked at Victor. "So this was not just abuse?" My investigator nodded. "It is attempted fraud, unlawful confinement, forgery, and financial exploitation." Victor finally lost his confidence. "You cannot prove anything," he snapped. I reached into my jacket and placed a small black device on the table. The warehouse had motion sensors. When I broke the chain, this recorder activated automatically. "Every word you said has been recorded." The detective smiled. "I think we have heard enough." As handcuffs clicked around Victor's wrists, he glared at me with pure hatred. "This is not over." I stepped closer. "No, Victor. It is finally beginning." The black SUV disappeared before any patrol car could catch it. Detective Harris turned to me. That driver knew exactly when Victor was arrested. This was not luck. Victor sat silently in the back of the police cruiser, staring out the window with an unsettling grin. Back at the sheriff's office, my forensic team began examining the evidence recovered from the warehouse. Within an hour, one investigator rushed into the briefing room. "We found something." He placed a laptop on the table. The hard drive had been encrypted, but my team cracked it. The screen filled with hundreds of files, including bank transfers, fake identities, property records, and surveillance videos. Then one folder caught my attention. Project Rose. Inside were detailed profiles of young women who had inherited money, land, or valuable assets. Emily's name was on the list. So were 12 others. Every victim had one thing in common. Someone close to them had betrayed them. Victor had never chosen his victims alone. He had inside help. Just then, Detective Harris received a phone call. His face turned pale. "What is it?" I asked. He slowly lowered the phone. Victor's lawyer arrived. So he did not come alone. Outside the station, a line of black luxury cars stopped at the entrance. Men in expensive suits stepped out first. Then an older man with silver hair walked through the doors without saying a word. Every officer in the lobby recognized him. Detective Harris whispered his name. Richard Ashford. The billionaire businessman looked directly at Victor. Then he turned toward me. "I believe we need to discuss what your daughter discovered." The room fell completely silent. For the first time since this nightmare began, I realized Victor was not the most dangerous person in the story. The room fell silent as Richard Ashford stepped forward. His tailored suit and calm expression made him look more like a respected businessman than someone connected to Victor Hale. He stopped a few feet from me. My name has probably raised a lot of questions, he said. It has. Start answering them. Richard nodded without hesitation. I did not come here to protect Victor. He turned toward the detectives. I came to make sure he never leaves prison. Victor's confident smile disappeared. You are lying, he shouted. Richard ignored him. My company hired Victor years ago to manage several charitable trusts. 6 months ago, our internal auditors discovered millions of dollars missing. Before we could confront him, he disappeared. He placed a thick folder on the table. Inside were financial records, wire transfers, and emails linking Victor to a network that targeted wealthy young women with inheritances. Emily's trust fund was only one of many. Detective Harris flipped through the documents. This evidence could destroy the entire organization. Richard looked at me. Unfortunately, Victor was not working alone. He pointed to one name highlighted in red, Olivia Cross, the accountant who cleaned the money. Another name followed, Mark Benson, the lawyer who created forged legal documents. Then came the final name. Everyone in the room froze. Laura Mitchell, my ex-wife. Emily covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Number. Richard looked at her gently. I am sorry, the evidence shows your mother signed the paperwork willingly. She received payments for every document she helped Victor forge. Laura broke down sobbing. I never thought he would hurt Emily. I only wanted the money. Emily slowly stepped back. I did not lose my mother today. I lost her the day she chose money over me. A heavy silence filled the room. Detective Harris closed the file. Arrest Laura Mitchell. As officers placed handcuffs on Laura, she looked at me with desperate eyes. Daniel, please. I did not answer. I walked to Emily instead and wrapped my arms around my daughter. For the first time in weeks, she finally felt safe. But across the room, Victor smiled once again. You still have not found the ledger. When you do, you will wish you had never opened that warehouse. Victor's final words echoed through the interrogation room. You still have not found the ledger. Detective Harris frowned. What ledger? Victor leaned back in his chair and smiled. The one that can destroy people far more powerful than me. Before anyone could ask another question, he refused to say another word. Hours later, my forensic team finished searching every inch of the Hale property. Nothing. No ledger. No hidden safe. No secret room. It was as if Victor had planned for this day years in advance. As Emily rested in a hospital room, I sat beside her bed. She stared at the ceiling before quietly speaking. Pop, I remember something. I looked at her. The night Victor locked me in the warehouse, he kept repeating one sentence. What was it? No one ever checks the place where memories are buried. The words hit me instantly. Photo albums. Emily slowly shook her head. Number. The cemetery. Within an hour, detectives obtained a search warrant. Just before sunrise, we arrived at Rosewood Memorial Cemetery. Victor's late father was buried there. The grave looked ordinary until ground penetrating. Scanners detected a metal box beneath the stone foundation. Carefully, investigators lifted the heavy slab. Inside was a waterproof steel case. Everyone held their breath. Detective Harris opened it. There it was, a thick black ledger. Alongside it were USB drives, cast passports, and handwritten notes listing dozens of names, secret payments, and offshore accounts. One detective turned pale. This is not just a fraud case anymore. It reaches politicians, lawyers, bankers, and people in law enforcement. Suddenly, every police radio crackled at once. All units, emergency. Shots fired at Rosewood Memorial Cemetery. A bullet shattered the windshield of a patrol car. Take cover, Detective Harris shouted. Masked gunmen emerged from the trees firing toward the officers. Someone wanted the ledger back, no matter how many lives it cost. The cemetery exploded into chaos. Bullets tore through the silence as officers rushed behind headstones for cover. Protect the ledger, Detective Harris shouted. One masked gunman sprinted toward the steel case. He never reached it. A deputy tackled him to the ground while another officer returned fire, forcing the remaining attackers back into the trees. I pulled Emily behind a stone monument and shielded her with my body. Stay down. I am not leaving you. Within minutes, police reinforcements surrounded the cemetery. Realizing they were trapped, the attackers fled into the forest, abandoning one of their own. The wounded gunman was handcuffed and taken into custody. Back at the sheriff's office, detectives removed his mask. The room fell silent. It was Mark Benson, the lawyer Richard Ashford had named. He had not come to rescue Victor. He had come to destroy the ledger before anyone could read it. During questioning, Mark refused to answer a single question, but the evidence spoke for him. His fingerprints were on forged contracts. His name appeared dozens of times inside the ledger, and one payment stood out above all the others: $5 million. The sender's name was not listed. Instead, there were only two initials, a K. Detective Harris stared at the page. We finally have the mastermind's initials. Before anyone could celebrate, another investigator rushed into the room. We have a problem. He placed a tablet on the table. The security cameras inside the county jail had gone dark for exactly 90 seconds. When the video returned, Victor Hale's cell was empty. The handcuffs lay on the floor. The guard assigned to his cell had vanished. Victor had not escaped alone. Someone with power had opened the door from the inside. I closed the ledger and looked at Detective Harris. This is not over. He nodded grimly. Number. Now the real hunt begins. Victor's escape changed everything. Every highway, airport, and border crossing was placed on alert. But Victor had vanished without leaving a trace. At sunrise, my forensic team finished decoding the USB drives found inside the ledger. One encrypted file finally opened. It contained hundreds of voice recordings. The first recording lasted only 12 seconds. Victor's voice filled the room. If anything happens to me, release everything. Okay, must fall with me. Detective Harris immediately played the next file. A calm, familiar voice answered Victor. Make sure Emily signs the trust papers. If she refuses, you know what to do. Emily covered her mouth. I have heard that voice before. Richard Ashford slowly stood up. His face turned pale. I know it too. The detectives traced the recording to a private meeting held 3 years earlier. The speaker was finally identified. Andrew Kingston, a powerful businessman, major political donor, and owner of Kingston Financial Group. For years, he had been praised as a generous philanthropist. Behind closed doors, he had built a criminal empire that stole fortunes from vulnerable heirs through fraud, intimidation, and kidnapping. Victor had never been the mastermind. He had only been the man who carried out the orders. Before detectives could obtain an arrest warrant, every computer screen inside the command center suddenly went black. A single message appeared. You are too late. Seconds later, a phone on Detective Harris' desk rang. He answered. His expression turned white. What happened? I asked. He lowered the phone slowly. Richard Ashford's private jet exploded just after takeoff. The room froze. Had the only witness against Andrew Kingston just been silenced? Or had someone planned something even bigger? The news of Richard Ashford's private jet spread across every television station. But something did not feel right. An hour later, my phone rang from an unknown number. I answered without speaking. A familiar voice whispered, Daniel, do not trust the news. It was Richard. You are alive. For now, the explosion was planned, but I never boarded the jet. I knew Andrew Kingston would try to eliminate me. Before I could ask another question, Richard said, Andrew has only one goal left. What is it? You. The call ended. Minutes later, my forensic team traced a hidden signal from Victor's abandoned phone. It led to an old shipping terminal at the city's harbor. By nightfall, detectives, federal agents, and my private security team quietly surrounded the area. Inside the warehouse, Victor stood beside Andrew Kingston. The black ledger lay on a steel table between them. Andrew smiled as I stepped into the light. I knew you would come. I looked at Emily, safely hidden behind the tactical team. This ends tonight. Andrew slowly picked up the ledger. You think this book can destroy me? He laughed. I own judges, politicians, and businessmen. One book changes nothing. I smiled for the first time. I know. Andrew frowned. Then why are you here? I held up a small flash drive. Because everything in that ledger has already been copied. At that exact moment, dozens of police vehicles surrounded the harbor. Helicopters filled the sky. Floodlights illuminated the warehouse from every direction. A loudspeaker echoed across the docks. Andrew, Kingston, Victor, hell, you are surrounded. Drop your weapons and surrender immediately. Victor looked at Andrew in panic. For the first time, the mastermind realized there was no escape. But Andrew slowly reached inside his coat and pulled out a handgun. Andrew Kingston pulled the handgun from his coat and aimed it directly at Emily. No one leaves here alive, he said coldly. Before he could pull the trigger, Victor shoved him aside. The gun fired into the ceiling. For a split second, everyone froze. The tactical team rushed in. Drop the weapon, they shouted. Andrew fired again. Officers returned fire, striking his arm. The handgun slid across the concrete floor. Victor tried to run through a side exit, but Detective Harris tackled him to the ground before he reached the door. It is over, Harris said as handcuffs locked around Victor's wrists once again. Andrew looked around the warehouse. Police officers surrounded every exit. Helicopters hovered overhead. There was nowhere left to run. For the first time in years, fear replaced his confidence. Over the following months, investigators used the ledger, the copied files, and the financial records to dismantle Andrew's criminal network. Dozens of corrupt lawyers, accountants, and officials were arrested. Millions of dollars in stolen assets were recovered and returned to their rightful owners. Victor Hale was sentenced to life in prison for kidnapping, fraud, forgery, and multiple violent crimes. Andrew Kingston received several life sentences without the possibility of parole. Laura accepted responsibility for her role in the conspiracy and was also convicted. Emily never celebrated their downfall. She simply wanted her life back. A year later, she stood beside me at the opening of the Emily Hope Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping survivors of abuse and financial exploitation rebuild their lives. As the ribbon was cut, Emily smiled through tears. You never gave up on me, Pop. I wrapped my arm around her shoulders. I never will. The crowd applauded as sunlight filled the courtyard. For the first time in a long time, Emily was no longer defined by what had been done to her. She was defined by the life she chose to build. And as Victor and Andrew watched their empires crumble, from prison they finally learned a lesson they had ignored for years. No lie lasts forever, and justice always finds its way home. The end. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and subscribe for more emotional revenge stories. See you in the next story.